I was the ghost. I didn't believe the house was haunted because nothing ever happened when I was awake. That was the first thing I noticed. No footsteps at night, no doors opening on their own, no cold spots, no whispers, no shadows slipping along the walls. The house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't relax you, it watches you. I moved in after the divorce, downsizing to something older and cheaper on the edge of town. A narrow 2-story place with creaking stairs and windows that didn't quite seal. The realtor apologized for the age of it, for the way the floor sloped slightly toward the back, for the faint smell of dust that never fully left. I told her I didn't mind. I wanted somewhere that felt empty. The first week passed without incident. I unpacked slowly, taking my time, letting rooms stay half-finished. I slept deeply, dreamlessly. For the first time in years, my mind felt quiet. Too quiet. It was on the 8th night that I noticed the journal. I found it on the kitchen table when I came downstairs in the morning. A thin, black notebook, closed neatly, placed square with the edge of the wood like it had been measured. It wasn't mine. I stood there staring at it, coffee growing cold in my hand, replaying the night before in my head. I hadn't had anyone over. I'd locked the doors. I was sure of it. I always checked the locks twice. The notebook had no label, no dust on it. When I opened it, the first page was blank. The second page wasn't. He was standing in the hallway again last night. My breath caught. The handwriting was careful, slightly slanted to the right, familiar in a way I couldn't place. I flipped the page. I heard him near the stairs around 2:10 a.m. I didn't open my door. Another page. He keeps walking through the living room like he's trying to remember where things are. My stomach tightened. I turned page after page, faster now. Dates lined the margins, times. Notes written like observations, not emotions. He doesn't seem to realize anyone can see him. He pauses in front of the mirror but doesn't react. I think he's looking for something. The last entry was from the previous night. He stood at the foot of my bed for almost a minute. I don't think he knows what he is. I slammed the notebook shut and stepped back from the table. My first thought was that someone was messing with me. A previous tenant, a neighbor with a key. Some elaborate prank that made no sense and had no audience. I checked the doors, locked, the windows, latched. The basement, empty. The house felt normal, still, quiet. That was when I noticed the time. According to the clock on the microwave, it was 9:42 a.m. According to my phone, it was 10:19. I stood there blinking, waiting for one of them to correct itself. Neither did. I told myself it was a power glitch, an old appliance drifting out of sync. I packed the notebook into a drawer and went to work, trying not to think about the words he stood at the foot of my bed. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid of seeing something, because I was afraid I wouldn't. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe. Pipes ticking softly, wood shifting. Nothing unusual, nothing threatening. At some point, exhaustion pulled me under. I dreamed of walking through the house in the dark, not like a nightmare. No panic, no urgency, just wandering. In the dream, I moved slowly, touching the walls as I passed, like I was reacquainting myself with the space. I paused at the mirror in the hallway and tilted my head, confused by my reflection, as if it didn't line up with how I felt. I woke with my heart pounding. The clock read 3:14 a.m. I lay there, listening. Nothing. In the morning, the journal was back on the table. Open. A new entry waited for me. He woke up around 3:14 this time. He looked confused. My hands went numb. I read the line again. and again. He, not me. I flipped the page. He doesn't remember walking. I don't think he remembers dying either. The word hit me harder than anything else so far. Dying. I felt suddenly unsteady, like the floor had dipped beneath me. I grabbed the back of a chair and forced myself to breathe. This was stress, sleepwalking, some kind of dissociative episode, my brain inventing patterns where there were none. I needed proof. That night, I set up my phone on the dresser and recorded myself sleeping, just to be sure. I climbed into bed, stared at the ceiling, and waited for sleep to take me. When I checked the footage in the morning, the video showed exactly what I expected. Hours of me lying still. Then, at 2:09 a.m., something changed. My body sat up, not suddenly, not violently, slowly, carefully. I watched myself swing my legs over the side of the bed and stand. I didn't look asleep. I looked vacant. My eyes were open but unfocused. My movements hesitant, like someone navigating a familiar space without quite remembering it. The timestamp continued to run. I watched myself leave the room. The video ended. I checked the time. It cut off at 2:13 a.m. 4 minutes missing. I sat there in the quiet bedroom, phone shaking in my hands, and thought of the line from the journal. He stood at the foot of my bed for almost a minute, and for the first time since moving in, I felt something crawl up my spine that had nothing to do with fear. Recognition. I watched the video 3 more times, hoping it would change. It didn't. Each time, the same thing happened. My body sat up at 2:09. My feet touched the floor. I stood there for a moment, swaying slightly, like I was waiting for instructions. Then I walked out of frame. I didn't remember any of it. I checked my step counter. According to my phone, I'd taken over 800 steps between 2:09 and 2:18 a.m. I had no memory of leaving the bed. That morning, the journal waited for me in a different place. Not the kitchen table, the hallway. It lay open on the floor beneath the mirror, positioned like it had been set down carefully rather than dropped. I stood at the edge of the hall, staring at my reflection above it. I looked pale, tired, solid, normal. The new entry was already written. He started recording himself last night. I think he's getting close. My mouth went dry. I knelt and turned the page. He doesn't see me when he's awake. That's good. I'm not sure what would happen if he did. I flipped again, faster now. When he walks at night, he moves like he's remembering rather than exploring. He pauses in doorways. He touches the walls. He stands in places that used to matter. Used to. I swallowed hard. The next line was written darker, pressed into the page harder than the others. I think he's trying to come back. I shut the journal and backed away from the mirror. I didn't go to work that day. I sat on the couch with the curtains open, sunlight filling the house like a protective layer. I tried to stay grounded, checking the time, touching solid objects, saying my name out loud to hear it in the air. Nothing happened. No movement, no voices, no strange sensations. By afternoon, a dangerous thought crept in. What if this wasn't happening to me? What if it was happening around me? That night, instead of recording myself, I stayed awake. I sat in the living room with the lights on, a cup of coffee growing cold in my hands. Midnight passed. 1 o'clock. 2. At 2:07 a.m., my chest tightened. Not fear, anticipation. At 2:09, the air changed. The house didn't get colder or darker. It felt hollowed, like the space had been prepared for something. I stood up slowly. My reflection in the TV screen lagged just a fraction of a second behind my movement. I stepped away from it. I didn't want to be in the bedroom. The thought of lying down made my skin crawl. Instead, I stood at the top of the stairs, watching the darkness below. At 2:10, I heard footsteps, not coming toward me, moving away, down the stairs, slow, careful. Each step landed exactly where my feet usually did. I held my breath and listened as the footsteps crossed the living room. They paused near the front door, then near the hallway, then near the mirror. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I told myself that if I stayed still, whatever was happening would pass. The footsteps stopped. Then, very softly, I heard breathing. Close, too close. Not behind me, beside me. I felt the presence before I saw it, a pressure in the air, like standing shoulder to shoulder with someone in a crowded room. The smell of dust and old wood deepened. Slowly, against every instinct I had, I turned my head. There was no one there, but the space next to me felt occupied, dense, defined. I raised my hand, shaking, and moved it through the air where a body should have been. My fingers tingled as they passed through something colder than the rest of the room. I yanked my hand back with a gasp. The breathing stopped. The house exhaled. When I looked at the clock, it read 2:14. 5 minutes gone. In the morning, the journal had been moved again. This time, it was on my nightstand. The newest entry was short. He almost saw me. Below it, written smaller. I don't think he understands yet. He thinks he's being followed. He doesn't realize he's the one wandering. I sat on the edge of the bed and pressed my palms into my eyes. If I was the one walking at night, if I was the figure being observed, then who was writing the journal? I turned to the first page again, this time reading more carefully. The handwriting wasn't just familiar, it was identical. Every loop, every slant, every pressure mark where the pen dug in too hard. This wasn't someone else watching me. It was me, just not the version that woke up in the morning. The realization settled over me slowly, horribly. The thing walking through the house at night wasn't a ghost haunting me. It was a part of me that hadn't realized it was dead, and whatever was writing in that journal, whatever was aware enough to observe, to remember, to take notes, was trying to keep me from finishing the transition, because the more I noticed, the more I remembered, the harder it was becoming for one of us to stay, and I was starting to suspect I wasn't the one with the stronger claim to this house. I stopped sleeping in the bedroom after that. Not because I was afraid of the dark, but because the bed felt claimed, like it belonged to a version of me that wasn't ready to let go. I moved to the couch instead, keeping the lights on, television playing softly through the night to anchor me in sound and motion. It didn't stop the walking. It only changed the route. The journal began appearing closer to wherever I slept, on the coffee table, on the arm of the couch. Once, balanced carefully on my chest when I woke just before dawn, my heart hammering as if I'd been startled awake by a touch I couldn't feel. Each new entry filled in gaps I didn't remember leaving behind. He avoided the bedroom tonight. He stood in the kitchen for a long time, touching the counter like it mattered. He tried to open the front door again. That one made my throat tighten. I checked the locks, all secured, no sign of forced entry. But when I reviewed the camera footage from the living room, I saw it. At 2:11 a.m., my body rose from the couch. I didn't rush. I didn't stumble. I moved with purpose now, as if the house no longer confused me. I walked straight to the front door and stood there, hand hovering just inches from the lock. I stayed like that for almost a full minute. Then I lowered my hand and stepped back. The timestamp jumped from 2:12 to 2:17. 5 minutes missing again. I sat through the footage with my arms wrapped around myself, trying not to panic. The movements were smoother now, more confident, less like a sleepwalker and more like someone learning a path by heart. That night me wasn't lost anymore. That scared me more than anything else so far. The journal confirmed it. He's remembering faster now. The house is helping him. I slammed the notebook shut and hurled it across the room. It hit the wall and fell open, pages fluttering. When I picked it up again, the last page had changed. A new sentence had been added, the ink darker, fresher. I don't know how much longer I can keep us separate. My hands shook. I needed answers. Not theories, not impressions. I went digging, public records, old news archives, death notices, anything tied to the address. It took hours before I found it. A brief article from 3 years ago. A man found dead in his home. No signs of forced entry, no struggle. Cause of death listed as sudden cardiac arrest. Estimated time of death, between 2 and 2:30 a.m. The photo attached to the article made my vision blur. It was me. Not exactly, but close enough that denial collapsed immediately. Same face, same eyes, same faint scar near the jawline I'd always had. The name was different, but the age matched. The address matched, the house matched. I stared at the screen until my reflection stared back. So I hadn't moved into this house after the divorce. I had moved back into it. Something inside me fractured then, splitting along a fault line I hadn't known was there. Memories surfaced, not clearly, not in sequence, but as sensations. Pain in my chest, the taste of copper, the sound of the house at night, breathing around me while I lay on the floor, unseen. I hadn't left the house alive. I'd never left at all. The version of me waking up every morning, the one reading the journal, drinking coffee, checking the locks, was the anomaly. A remainder. A memory with momentum. That night, the house didn't wait until 2:09. The shift came earlier. I felt it while I was brushing my teeth, a heaviness in my limbs, a soft pulling sensation behind my eyes, like sleep trying to claim me while I was still standing. I gripped the sink and stared at my reflection. For a moment, it stayed in sync. Then it smiled, not wide, not malicious, recognizing. I stumbled back, heart racing. "No," I whispered. "You don't get to decide." The reflection didn't move when I did. Behind it, faint but unmistakable, I saw the outline of another figure standing in the doorway, watching. The journal appeared at my feet. I didn't remember dropping it. I opened it with shaking hands. He saw me tonight. That wasn't supposed to happen yet. Below it, a final line. If he fully remembers, one of us has to stop. The house creaked softly, settling in its bones, and in that sound, I understood the choice I'd been avoiding. I wasn't being haunted. I was being replaced by the version of me that belonged here, by the one who had already died and learned how to stay. And I was running out of time to decide which of us the house would remember. I didn't try to leave. That was the truth I finally had to face. I stood in the middle of the living room as the house settled around me, the walls creaking softly like joints easing into a familiar posture. The lights dimmed on their own, not plunging the room into darkness, just softening it, making it easier to stay. The journal lay open on the floor where I'd dropped it. I picked it up slowly. My handwriting stared back at me, two intentions woven through the same pages. One observing, one wandering, one awake, one unfinished. I understood now why the house felt calm instead of violent. This wasn't a haunting, it was a correction. The house wasn't trying to scare me away. It was trying to finish something that had been interrupted. A life that had ended too abruptly to fully let go of itself. I sat down on the couch, exhaustion sinking into my bones. Not physical exhaustion, something deeper. Like I'd been holding myself together through sheer denial. "I remember," I said aloud. The words felt heavy, dangerous. The house responded instantly. A warmth spread through the room, gentle and precise. The pressure I'd been fighting for days eased, replaced by something almost like relief. Memories flooded in, not all at once, but in waves. The argument on the phone that night, the tightness in my chest I'd ignored. Standing in the hallway, dizzy, reaching for the wall. The floor rushing up to meet me. I hadn't been found right away. The house had been quiet with me then too. I looked toward the hallway mirror. My reflection stood there, watching. But now I understood what I was seeing. Not a threat, not an intruder. Completion. The reflection stepped forward, not out of the glass, but closer within it, aligning perfectly with my movements, my posture, my breath. For the first time since I'd moved back in, nothing lagged, nothing felt out of sync. The journal slipped from my hands. I stood, slowly, and walked toward the mirror. Each step felt easier than the last. "I didn't want to disappear," I whispered. The reflection nodded. "I know." The voice wasn't spoken aloud. It moved through the walls, the floor, the air between us. It sounded like my own thoughts when they weren't tangled with fear. "You stayed," it continued. "You remembered just enough to come back." The house creaked approvingly, a sound I now recognized as recognition. "I thought I was alive," I said. "You were," the voice replied, "as long as you needed to be." I felt it then, the strain of holding form, of maintaining routines, of pretending the daylight version of me was the real one. I'd been living on borrowed awareness, anchored by denial and habit. And it was exhausting. I stepped closer to the mirror. The reflection smiled gently, not triumph, not hunger. Welcome. When I reached out, my hand didn't meet cold glass. It met warmth. The room breathed in, and for the first time since that night years ago, I felt whole. Morning never came after that, not because time stopped, but because I stopped needing to measure it. The house still stands. People pass it every day. Someone new will live there someday. Unpack their boxes, I settle into its quiet rooms. They'll say it feels peaceful. They'll say it feels lived in. And sometimes, late at night, when the house creaks softly and the rooms seem fuller than they should be, they'll feel watched over, protected. Because the house remembers me now, not as a ghost, not as a mistake, but as someone who finally came home. If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing for more long-form horror narrations. You have been listening to American Haunted Tales.
Thank you for watching.